The rain had been falling all afternoon, thin, icy threads slicing through the gray November sky. The parking lot outside Miller's grocery looked almost deserted, the asphalt gleaming with puddles that reflected the flickering streetlights. Ethan Carter shoved his hands deeper into his jacket pockets, his breath misting in the cold air. He'd just finished another long day at the auto shop, grease still staining his nails despite 2 rounds of scrubbing. He wasn't the type to linger in grocery stores, but his fridge was nearly empty, and his sister would kill him if he showed up at Thanksgiving with nothing to contribute. He grabbed a basket and headed toward the produce aisle, his mind already elsewhere. Bills, the broken heater in his apartment, the never-ending feeling that his life was stuck in neutral. That's when he saw her. She stood by the self-checkout, motionless, her hands trembling as she fumbled through her purse. Her dark hair clung to her cheeks, damp from the rain. Something about the way she kept glancing over her shoulder, quick, anxious, like a trapped animal, made Ethan stop mid-step. She wasn't crying, but her eyes told a story. Wide, glassy, terrified. He hesitated. Maybe she was just having a bad day. Maybe it wasn't his business. People in this town barely looked at each other anymore. But something inside him, the part that hadn't yet hardened completely, refused to walk away. He picked up a bag of oranges he didn't need and drifted toward the self-checkout area, pretending to study the machine. "Ma'am, do you need any help?" one of the store clerks asked gently. The woman shook her head too fast. "No, I'm fine. I'm fine." Her voice cracked on the last word. The clerk nodded awkwardly and stepped away. Ethan could tell the kid didn't want trouble. No one ever did, but Ethan noticed something else. A man, standing near the sliding glass doors, pretending to read a flyer on the wall. He was too still. His eyes flicked toward the woman every few seconds. When she looked up, the color drained from her face. That was enough. Ethan dropped the oranges into his basket and walked toward her, heart hammering in his chest. He had no plan, no right to interfere, but his gut screamed that something was wrong. "Hey," he said softly when he got close enough. "You dropped this." She blinked, confused. He held out a receipt he'd pulled from his own pocket. It was crumpled, meaningless, but it gave him an excuse to approach. For a second, she didn't move. Then, almost imperceptibly, she shook her head. Not a no, more like a plea. "Don't draw attention. Don't make it worse." Ethan followed her eyes. The man by the door had turned slightly, watching now. "Is that your car out front?" Ethan asked, keeping his tone casual. "The blue sedan." Her lips parted, and she hesitated before nodding slowly. "Great," Ethan said, lowering his voice. "You might want to check your rear tire. It looked low when I parked next to you." It was a lie, but it was a way out. The woman swallowed hard, her hand tightening around the strap of her purse. "Thank you," she whispered. They walked out together. Ethan kept his body between her and the entrance. The man at the door shifted, his jaw tightening, but didn't move. Outside, the wind slapped Ethan's face. The lot was nearly empty now. The woman's car, a small, older Toyota, was parked under a flickering light. She stopped by it, fumbling with her keys. "You okay?" he asked quietly. She didn't answer right away. Her eyes darted around, scanning the lot. "He followed me," she finally said, voice shaking. "From work. I thought he'd left, but..." Ethan's stomach clenched. "Do you want me to call the cops?" She shook her head fiercely. No, please. I just want to go home." He looked back. The man had stepped outside now, standing just under the awning, watching. Ethan exhaled slowly. "All right, then let's make sure you get home safe." Her eyes widened. "You don't even know me." "Doesn't matter," he said simply. "Nobody deserves to be scared like that." He helped her into her car, then leaned down to whisper, "Drive to the main road and turn right. I'll follow you, just for a bit. If he follows either of us, we'll handle it." She nodded, her fingers trembling as she turned the ignition. The engine coughed to life. As she pulled out, Ethan slipped into his truck and followed. The man didn't move for a few seconds, then he got into his own car and started after them. Ethan's grip tightened on the steering wheel. The rain made it hard to see, but the red taillights ahead of him guided the way. The woman turned right at the main road. The man's car followed. Ethan sped up. He didn't know this woman's name. He didn't know what the man wanted. But he knew one thing for sure. He wasn't going to let her face this alone. The chase continued for several tense minutes until they hit a stoplight near a 24-hour diner. The woman pulled in suddenly, skidding slightly on the wet pavement. Ethan followed. When he looked back, the man's car kept going. Straight through the light. Gone. The woman was breathing hard when Ethan reached her. She rolled down the window, tears mingling with raindrops on her cheeks. "He's gone," Ethan said, glancing around just to be sure. She nodded shakily. "Thank you. I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't." "It's okay," he said gently. "You're safe now." For a long moment, she just sat there, catching her breath. Then she whispered, "My name's Lily." "Ethan," he said with a small smile. She looked down, then back up. Can I buy you a coffee? Please. Just to say thank you." He hesitated, but the sincerity in her voice left no room for refusal. They walked into the diner together, wet and shivering, two strangers who'd crossed paths in a storm neither had expected. But sometimes, fate didn't need to ask permission. It just showed up, with fear in someone's eyes, and kindness in someone else's heart. The diner smelled of coffee and rain-soaked clothes. Old ceiling fans hummed lazily above red vinyl booths, and a jukebox in the corner played a faint 80s ballad. The kind of place where stories began, or ended, quietly, without anyone noticing. Lily sat across from Ethan, her fingers wrapped around a steaming mug. She hadn't spoken much since they came in, and Ethan didn't push her. Sometimes silence was the only language a person could manage after fear. Finally, she exhaled. "You must think I'm ridiculous," she said softly. Ethan shook his head. "No, I think you've had a hell of a day." She looked up, eyes glistening. "He's my coworker. His name's Mark. I didn't think he'd actually follow me." She laughed nervously, a sound that didn't quite reach her eyes. "I told him I wasn't interested. He didn't like that." Ethan's jaw tightened. "And your boss?" "I told her weeks ago. She said he's just friendly. That I should not overreact." Ethan muttered a quiet curse under his breath. He'd seen this before, the way people brushed off fear until it grew teeth. Lily took another sip, her hands still trembling. "I tried to ignore him. Changed my routes, stayed late at work, but today he was waiting outside when I left. I went to the store hoping he'd give up." Her voice cracked. "He didn't." Ethan didn't know what to say. He wasn't some hero out of a movie, just a tired mechanic who happened to be in the right place at the right time. But hearing her story stirred something in him, something heavy and protective. "You're not alone anymore," he said quietly. "Not tonight." She looked at him then. Really looked at him. And for the first time, a small, fragile smile touched her lips. They talked for hours, the rain easing into a drizzle outside. Lily told him about her job at the insurance office downtown, her little apartment near the river, and how she'd moved to the city 2 years ago with big plans and no family nearby. Ethan shared bits of his own story, how he'd left college early to take care of his younger sister after their parents died, how he fixed cars because it was the only thing that made sense when nothing else did. Somewhere between the coffee refills and laughter that came too easily after fear, the tension began to melt. When the clock above the counter struck midnight, Lily sighed. "I should go home." Ethan nodded. "I'll follow you. Just until you're parked and safe." Lily hesitated, then said quietly, "Would it be okay if you walked me to my door? Just for tonight?" Of course. Her apartment building sat on the edge of the river district, quiet, lined with bare trees and lampposts that hummed faintly in the cold. Ethan parked behind her and walked her to the entrance. "Do you want me to check inside first?" he asked. She smiled tiredly. "I think I'll be okay." Still, he waited until she unlocked her door and turned on the light. She waved from inside. He waved back and started to leave. "Ethan," she called softly. He turned. "Thank you," she said. "You didn't have to stop. Most people wouldn't have." He smiled faintly. "Maybe. But you didn't have to face that alone either." For a long second, neither spoke. Then he nodded and walked away, his boots splashing through the shallow puddles. The days after, the following week passed quietly. Ethan went back to work, but he couldn't shake the memory of Lily's eyes, fearful, grateful, alive. He told himself she was fine now, that he'd done his part. Still, every time he passed the grocery store or saw a blue sedan on the street, his chest tightened just a little. Then, one Friday afternoon, the bell above the auto shop door jingled. Ethan looked up from under a lifted truck. Lily stood there, holding a cardboard tray with 2 coffees. "Thought I'd return the favor," she said shyly. He blinked, then laughed. "You didn't have to." "I know," she said. "But I wanted to." She handed him a cup. "Cappuccino with extra sugar." "You look like a sugar person." "Is that an insult or a compliment?" he asked, smiling. "Depends on how much you like sweet things." It became a small ritual after that. Every few days, she'd stop by the shop during lunch breaks, bringing coffee or sandwiches. They'd sit on the curb outside, talking about everything and nothing, the weird customers he dealt with, the podcasts she loved, the dog she wanted but couldn't have because of her lease. Each time she laughed, it was louder, freer. And each time, Ethan noticed the fear in her eyes fading a little more. One chilly morning in December, Lily showed up with 2 paper bags and a nervous grin. "What's this?" Ethan asked. "Breakfast," she said. "And an idea." He raised an eyebrow. "That sounds dangerous." She laughed. "There's a community center near my apartment. They're looking for volunteers to help repair old bikes for kids in the neighborhood. I told them I knew someone who could fix anything with wheels." Ethan chuckled. "That's a bold claim. So, will you come?" she asked, her eyes hopeful. He hesitated. He'd spent years keeping to himself. Work, home, repeat. But the way she looked at him, like kindness was something that could still grow in the cracks, made saying no impossible. "Yeah," he said, "I'll come." The turning point. The first Saturday they volunteered, the small workshop buzzed with noise, clattering tools, laughter, children running between tables. Ethan knelt beside a rusted red bike, tightening the chain while Lily held the handlebars steady. "You're good at this," she said. He smiled. "Guess fixing things is easier than fixing people." She glanced at him. "You fixed something in me." He froze for a second, not sure how to respond. But the warmth in her voice wasn't heavy, it was gratitude, pure and simple. By the end of the day, they'd repaired 7 bikes and earned a dozen smiles from kids riding in circles around the parking lot. As they packed up, Lily brushed her hair back and said, "You know, I think people come into our lives at exactly the right time." Ethan looked at her. "Yeah, I think you might be right." A year later, spring came, soft and green. The world felt lighter somehow. Lily had switched jobs. New office, new start. She'd finally adopted a small rescue dog named Charlie. And every Saturday, she and Ethan still volunteered at the center. They never labeled what they were. Friends, something more, it didn't matter. What mattered was that they'd built something steady out of fear and kindness. One evening, they sat by the river, watching the sunset burn orange over the water. "Do you ever think about that night?" Lily asked quietly. Ethan nodded. "Sometimes." Every time it rains," she said. "I used to hate the sound. Now it just reminds me that someone cared enough to stop." He smiled softly. "Guess rain isn't so bad, then." She turned to him, her eyes gentle. "You know what's funny? I didn't ask for help. But somehow, you heard me anyway." Ethan looked at her for a long moment. Sometimes you don't need words to know someone needs you. The breeze carried the faint scent of rain again, though the sky stayed clear. Lily leaned her head on his shoulder, and for the first time in a long time, everything felt right. Epilogue. Years later, when the community center put up a new mural, bright colors, children on bikes, and a quote painted in looping letters, it read, "Greater than, kindness doesn't always start with words. Sometimes, it begins when you refuse to look away." Ethan stood beside Lily, their hands brushing, both smiling at the memory of a rainy night when fear met courage, and 2 strangers found hope. She hadn't asked for help, but he couldn't ignore the fear in her eyes. And because of that one choice, both their lives changed forever.